Have you ever suffered the loss of a loved one? Maybe you've grieved, felt the emotional pain or sadness because someone you love died. And maybe that grief lasted months, maybe years, or maybe it was decades ago and you're still facing it and dealing with it on some level. Well, I want you to know that grief is based on belief. And what I've found is that with many of my clients over the years, is that when the underlying belief about death and about being separated from the loved one has changed, the emotional pain changes into a sense of connection and presence. As much as people may say grieving is normal, and it is normal, it's not something that is hardwired, and it's not something that we have to endure. And even if you may feel some emotional pain from loss, it doesn't have to last very long, and it's certainly not something that should be an enduring cross that you have to bear. And let me explain and prove this. There are cultures around the world, more indigenous cultures than more Western or modern cultures. And many of these societies actually celebrate when someone has died. And they're celebrating one of many things. One, they could be celebrating their life, and they share stories in a sense of joy and jubilation as opposed to tears and anger and sadness and bitterness. They might be celebrating what they believe to be a transformation from the physical self to the non-physical, or a transition from this lifetime to the next. Whatever it might be, whatever the religious or spiritual model that would allow for someone to think that way. The key is, usually the reason why we feel pain and sadness and anger at the perceived loss of someone is because of the way we think about life and the way we think about death. But more importantly, our belief that we have lost our connection with that person and they're no longer in our life is actually what creates most of what is known as grief. Grief is actually a very selfish emotion, and I'm not judging it as bad. I've experienced it myself. I'm simply saying that grief is something that is mostly self-oriented. The amount of emotional pain we feel when that person is gone indicates the amount of emotional attachment to that person that we had. The stronger the emotional attachment, the stronger the pain when the attachment has been severed. So, in order for us to feel grief, we have to believe one or more of several things. One, that that person is no longer in any existence, they're nothing, they're gone, and that, or worse, that they're going to suffer because they've died. Two, that we will never have a connection with them anymore and our life has been irrevocably changed and we have no access to them. And three, that the pain that we experienced in the moment is something that we should continue to have in order to honor them. In other words, we need to feel the pain of the loss, because if we don't, then maybe we don't love them anymore. Now notice one thing that all of these have in common. They're all based on a belief system. And we always have to believe something. We've learned these things. We're not born with them. If you believe something, it's because you've learned that belief. You can change your beliefs. And when you change the way you think about something, it changes how you feel. You can either believe something that disempowers you and keeps you in a state of emotional pain, or you can believe in something that inspires you. And I'm not even talking about religious beliefs here. What I'm saying is, it's not about whether it's real or not real. It's not about whether it's rational or irrational. It's about believing something that you can live with. And what I've found is that with many of my clients over the years, is that when the underlying belief about death and about being separated from the loved one has changed, the emotional pain changes into a sense of connection and presence. So if you're dealing with grief and sadness due to the loss of someone that you love and that you felt emotionally attached to, realize that The pain that you're still feeling is due to the fact that you're still emotionally attached. That then becomes an unhealthy attachment that needs to be changed or severed. You can break the attachment and still feel love. And in fact, I would argue that once the attachment is broken, not only does the grief go away, but the feeling of love that you have for that person and from that person becomes very available to you. Grief is optional. It's based on your beliefs. When you change the way you think, it changes the way you feel.